The United States did not declare war on Germany until 1917, but some individual Americans were already serving as volunteers in Allied units or as ambulance men, like E. Cummings, who later recalled,
"My sweet old, etc. Aunt Lucy, during the recent war, could, and what is more did, tell you just what everybody was fighting for. My sister Isabel created hundreds and hundreds of socks, not to mention shirts, flea-proof ear warmers, etc., blisters, etc. My mother hoped that I would die, etc. Bravely, of course. My father used to become hoarse, talking about how it was a privilege, and if only he could. Meanwhile, myself, etc., lay quietly in the deep mud, etc., dreaming, etc., of your smile, eyes, knees, and your, etc.
Our fellows hate the Boche like anything. So wrote a young officer at the height of the Battle of the Somme. But many had an enormous respect for the Germans as a fighting soldier, and it is remarkable how little animosity was felt for the men on the other side of the wire.
One British soldier, Private Isaac Rosenberg, a talented painter and already a published poet, spoke of this in Break of Day in the Trenches.
The darkness crumbles away. It's the same old druid time as ever. Only a live thing leaps in my hand, a queer, sardonic rat. As I pull the parapet's poppy to stick behind my ear, droll rat, they would shoot you if they knew your cosmopolitan sympathies. Now you have touched this English hand, you will do the same to a German. Soon, no doubt, if it be your pleasure, to cross the sleeping green between. It seems you inwardly grin as you pass strong eyes, fine limbs, haughty athletes, less chance than you for life, bonds to the whims of murder, sprawled in the bowels of the earth, the torn fields of France. But what do you see in our eyes at the shrieking irons and flame hurled through still heavens? What quaver? What heart aghast? Poppies, whose roots are in man's veins, drop and are ever dropping. But mine, in mine ear, is safe. Just a little white with the dust.
The Hun is a strange fellow. We're constantly gingering him up with raids and artillery shots. He fights very well against odds, and I can't help admiring him. You can't think how deep an interest you feel in these people across there, separated from us only by that narrow strip of bog and those two entanglements of rusty wire. And somehow one doesn't, or at any rate I do not, feel much rancour. With malice towards none, forgive them for they know not what they do. And they do it jolly well. That is as far as the actual combatants are concerned. But we shall not forget the people who made the war.
Sapper Garfield Powell, Royal Engineers, wrote, "I was shocked to hear that Tom had been wounded. One thinks that I would feel burning anger against the Germans. Not so. The whole damn show is so impersonal that one cannot, at least I cannot, feel any personal emotion, except perhaps fear, when in the thick of things. Hope, revenge, anger, contempt. Any of these would be a sustaining emotion in action, but very few experience them, I believe."
The enemy was, however, indisputably there to be wounded and killed. The whole purpose of all those months of cheerful mountain training in rifle and bayonet drill was that eventually a German would be in the sight of one's rifle or vulnerable to the exultation of a bayonet charge. In practice, it was not always so simple. There were now other means of killing. A Muslim soldier wrote in 1915 to a friend in India.
We have not seen the sun for 4 months. Thus we are sacrificed. I have neither sleep by night nor ease by day. In the world there can never have been such a war before, nor will there ever be again. It is sad that God, who has so much power and sent the flood, should have brought such a day to pass. He has made the Germans fowls of the air, dragons of the earth, and poisonous crocodiles of the sea. And he has given them such skill that, when we encounter their deceitful bayonets, they set light to some substance which caused a suffocating vapour, and then they attack.
Sapper Powell, trained to disable and kill by gas, wrote in his diary, "What a difference there is between the war of visions and the actual thing. In a few days we go up to let off the gas. More dirty work, or rather, more help towards the triumph of right over might."
Killing with bullet or bayonet made one acutely aware of the human being one was killing. Gas, however, was impersonal, and both sides used it.
Gas last night,
And gas the night before, don't get gas tonight, if we've ever been gas before. When with gas, we're sick and mean. Phosgene and mustard gas are much too much for me. They're warning us. One respirator for the 4 of us. Thank your lucky stars, the 3 of us can run.
so none of us can use it all alone.
Gas! Quick, boys! An ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. But someone still was yelling out and stumbling and floundering like a man in fire or lime. Dim through the misty panes and thick green light, as under a green sea, I saw him drowning. In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his hanging face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come curdling from the froth-corrugated irons, obscene as cancer, bitter as the cud of vile, incurable sores on innocent tongues, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory the old lie. Dulce est, decorum est, pro patria mori.
That was by Second Lieutenant Wilfred Owen, killed 1 week before the armistice in 1918. Private Ivor Gurney, a composer as well as a poet, lived on until 1937, permanently shell-shocked, convinced the war was still on. Here he speaks to a dead comrade's fiancée.
To his love, he's gone, and all our plans are useless indeed. We'll walk no more on Cotswold, where the sheep feed quietly and take no heed. His body, that was so quick, is not as you knew it on Severn River, under the blue, driving our small boat through. You would not know him now, but still he died nobly, so cover him over with violets of prying purple from Severn's side. Cover him soon, and with thick-set masses of memoried flowers, hide that red, wet thing I must somehow forget.
Commander Hassan Shah, a junior Indian officer, wrote to his own beloved in Punjab.
Listen, I will tell you of an incident which occurred the other day. I was on the battlefield, accompanied by a trooper, and came upon a wounded British soldier. "Well, friend," I said to him, How are things going with you? Quite all right, he replied. I'm proud I was of service in the fight, but I'm thirsty. I gave him water to drink and asked if he wanted anything else. I regret nothing, he said, except that I shall not meet my sweetheart. She would have nothing to do with me at first, but 4 months ago she wrote and said that in the whole world she loved only me and begged me to come to her soon. My friend, I said to him, may the all-merciful God satisfy the desires of your heart and unite you with your beloved. I'm finished, he said, and when my end comes, my only regret is that when my love called to me, I was unable to go to her. My friend, I said, weeping with pity, my own condition is the same as yours. I told the trooper to move him to a safer place as shells were falling near. He lifted him and was carrying him away, but he had not gone 100 paces when the soldier cried and expired.
Alan Seeger, an American volunteer, joined the French Foreign Legion to fight in Flanders, also spoke of meeting someone on the battlefield. Rendezvous. I have a rendezvous with death at some disputed barricade, when spring comes back with rustling shade and apple blossoms fill the air. I have a rendezvous with death when spring brings back blue days and fair. It may be that he shall take my hand and lead me into his dark land and close my eyes and quench my breath. It may be I shall pass him still. I have a rendezvous with death on some scarred slope of battered hill when spring comes round again this year and the first meadow flowers appear. God knows 'twere better to be deep pillowed in silk and scented down, where love throbs out in blissful sleep, pulse nigh to pulse and breath to breath, where hushed awakenings are dear. But I've a rendezvous with death at midnight in some flaming town, when spring trips north again this year, and I to my pledged word am true. I shall not fail that rendezvous.
Seeger was killed in action in 1916 on the Somme. The British soldiers fighting at Ypres, generally called wipers, were less resolute.
Anthem for doomed youth. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning to save the choirs, the shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. What candles may be held to speed them all? Not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows should be their pall, their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds.
If you want the old battalion,
I know where they are.
I know know where they are.
I know where they are.
If you want the old battalion,
We know where they are. They're hanging on the old barbed wire. I've seen them, I've seen them, hanging on the old barbed wire. I've seen them, hanging on the old barbed wire.
Some soldiers died behind the lines, not by enemy action. They had collapsed mentally and physically under the strain of battle. Traumatised, they lost their nerve. Some simply walked away, and in most cases were treated as deserters under military law. One of them was number 7249, Private Herbert Morris, from St Catherine, Jamaica.
That is something we forget. Black Caribbean soldiers served in Flanders. Though not allowed to fight, they worked as labourers on the lines of communication. Nevertheless, they risked and lost their lives both behind the lines and at the front. In 1916, 15,000 West Indians volunteered to serve overseas in the British Army. Like most of them, Herbert Morris enlisted in the British West Indies Regiment.
In May 1917, his battalion, the 6th, began working in Ypres and soon sustained casualties while loading, transporting and stacking shells for the artillery, back-breaking and dangerous work. In 1 week in July 1917, 3,000 British guns in the Ypres salient fired 4 3/4 tons of shells for every yard of the front.
On August the 20th, Herbert Morris and his platoon were detailed to work for the heavy artillery at a gun position 500 yards from the front line. He climbed aboard the last lorry, but later dropped off and went absent.
8 days later, he turned up at a rest camp in Balham, in uniform and steel helmet, saying he had been sent there by mistake. He had no ticket nor leave warrant, was arrested and returned to camp under escort.
Court-martialed, he pleaded not guilty to desertion, but said nothing during prosecution. Though he had previously gone absent and received field punishment twice, both his platoon commander and corporal described him as otherwise well-behaved, intelligent, and hard-working. His defense was brief.
I am troubled with my head and cannot stand the sound of the guns. I reported to the doctor and he gave me no medicine or anything. It was on Sunday, the 19th of August, 1917 that I saw the doctor. He gave me no satisfaction.
On finding that the medical officer was not present, the court did not seek medical opinion or adjourn so that a medical board could assess Private Morris's mental state.
When he deserted, conditions for artillerymen in forward positions around Ypres were so unbearable that gunners had to be relieved every 24 hours, unable to cope with the hellish burden of sustaining the prolonged artillery barrage.
The failure to hear medical evidence which could have supported his defence was crucial because there was no appeal against either verdict or sentence. Instead, the court found Morris guilty of desertion and sentenced him to death.
Normally, several senior officers were consulted before such a sentence was confirmed. Here, only the Commander-in-Chief, Field Marshal Hay, was involved. A major offensive was beginning. An execution would reinforce discipline among fighting troops and labour battalions. Natives had to be treated firmly. Chinese and Egyptian labourers had recently rioted. Private Morris's death was a message to them.
Hay confirmed the sentence. Like 274 other British soldiers found guilty of desertion or cowardice in action, the shell-shocked Jamaican was to die. He wrote a final letter to his mother, telling her he could not stand the noise of the heavy guns. At dawn, on 20th September, 1917, he was shot.
Even had he been able to withstand the stress, Herbert Morris should not have been a deep salient at all, because officially he was too young for overseas service, only 17.
One of the minor but effective horrors of war, some Tommies said, were McConaughey's tinned meat and vegetables. Here's a little trench cuisine.
A ragu McConaughey. Open one tin of McConaughey ration, warm gently until the greasy oil floats on the top. Remove this by blotting up with a piece of 4x2 flannelette, rag for cleaning rifle. Place this on one side for later use. Remove the black lumps in the ration McConaughey. These are potatoes. Squeeze out the greasy oil from the 4x2 into a frying pan and gently fry the potatoes. Take 2 handfuls of dried vegetables. They look very much like any other dried leaves. Mixed with a little water flavoured with chloride of lime and pat into croutons. These should be gently fried after the potatoes are cooked. Reheat the McConaughey ration and serve the whole on cold enamel plates.
At home, it was reported the king was concerned with nothing except winning the war. Even when Winston Churchill, then Lord of the Admiralty, casually remarked that if Buckingham Palace was bombed by a Zeppelin, it would have a very stimulating effect upon the people, the king only mildly suggested it might have a very depressing effect upon him.
Left, right, left, right, left, right.
Dear Mother, this war's about sell the pig, ride it out. John.
Dear John, pig's gone, soldier on.
Dear Auntie, hoping this finds you as it leaves me. We're wading up to our necks in blood. Please send fags and a lifebelt.
From Vera Britton's diary. On Boxing Day, directly after breakfast, I went down to Brighton, sent on my way with many good wishes from the others. I walked along the promenade and looked at the grey sea tossing rough with white surf-crested waves, and felt a little anxiety at the kind of crossing he had had. But at any rate, he should be safely in England by this time, though he probably has not been able to send any message today, owing to the difficulties of telephones and telegrams on Sunday and Christmas Day combined. So I only have to wait for the morrow with such patience as I can manage. Being a little tired with the energies of the night, I spent a good deal of the rest of the day in sleeping, thinking of the sweet anticipation of the morning and of the face and the voice dearest of all to me on earth.
Monday, December the 27th. I had just finished dressing when someone came to say that there was a telephone message for me. I sprang up joyfully, thinking to hear in a moment the dear dreamed of tones of the beloved voice. But the telephone message was not from Roland, but from his sister Claire. It was not to say that Roland had arrived, but instead his telegram had come. Regret to inform you that Lieutenant R.A. Leighton, 7th Worcesters, died of wounds December the 23rd. Lord Kitchener sends his sympathy. Colonel of Territorial Force, Records, Warwick.
New Year's Eve, 11:55. This time last year, he was seeing me off on Charing Cross Station after the theatre, and I had just begun to realize I loved him. Today, he is lying in the military cemetery in Louvain, because a week ago he was wounded in action and had just 24 hours of consciousness more, and then went to sleep in France. And I, who in impatience felt a fortnight ago that I could not wait another minute to see him, must wait till all eternity. All has been given me, and all taken away again, in 1 year.
John McCrae, a Canadian doctor who attended many men gassed at Ypres, wrote, "In Flanders fields. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses row on row that mark our place. And in the sky the lark still bravely singing flies scarce heard amidst the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up your quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields."
The living soldiers, though, had reason to quarrel with their own staff officers at headquarters, miles behind the lines.
Base leader. If I were fierce and bold and short of breath, I'd live with scarlet majors at the base and speed glum heroes up the line to death. You'd see me with my puffy, petulant face, guzzling and gulping in the best hotel, reading the roll of honour. Oh, young chap, I'd say, I used to know his father well. Yes, we've lost heavily in this last scrap. And when the war is done and youth stone dead, I toddle safely home and die in bed.
Siegfried Sassoon, the young officer who wrote those lines, won the MC, but was bitterly critical of the war and was lucky, some say, to escape court-martial. He was sent to a hospital for neurasthenic officers, where he met another shell-shock patient, Wilfred Owen, who wrote later,
"What are the chances? I mind as how the night before that show, us five got talking. We was in the know. Over the top tomorrow, boys. We're for it. First wave we are. First ruddy wave, that's tore it. Ah well, says Jimmy, and he's seen some scrapping. There ain't no more than 5 things as can happen. You get knocked out, else wounded, bad or cushy, scuppered, or now except you're feeling mushy. One of us got a knockout, blown the chops. T'other was hurt, like losing both his props. And one, to use the word of hypocrites, had the misfortune to be took with Fritz. Now me, I wasn't scratched. Praise God Almighty, though next time, please, I'd thank him for a blighty. But poor young Jim, he's living and he's not. He reckoned he'd 5 chances, and he had. He's wounded, killed, and prisoner. All the lot. Bloody lot all rolled in one. Jim's mad.
A blighting wound, otherwise known as a blighting, a wound bad enough to ensure that a soldier was sent back to Britain, became for many men, particularly those who had somehow survived long months in the trenches, a kind of ultimate ambition, provided it was not too serious and in the right place. Some were not fortunate, for their wounds were attended to, and they were sent back to war. However, when Corporal George Morgan, 1st Bradford Pals, finally got the wound which he knew had been coming to him for months, he was fortunate. It was a perfect blighting.
It was August 1917. We were in front of Limmy, and I had just received a parcel with a tin of strawberries in it. We'd been at stand 2 in the front line, and we came down the communication trench to have some breakfast. I dug a little hole out of the trench to make a seat to sit on, and we boiled some tea in our vegetables. I'd just opened the tin of strawberries and was going to eat them when a shell came over. I was sitting there in my hole with my legs sticking out, and there was a man going down the trench to the doctor's. He had some trouble with his eyes. And this whiz-bang simply blew his head off. And a piece of shrapnel hit me in the legs. As for that tin of strawberries, I don't know where it went to. It was a wonderful blighty. I'd often thought, where will I get hit? You can't go every day, month after month, just being missed. I didn't want it in my head. I didn't want to be balming after the war. And I used to think, I'd like it in my legs somewhere. And that was just where I got it. Everybody who saw it said, what a lovely blighty. I went down to Rouen, and then over to England. And everybody who came to dress my wound said, what a lovely blighty. That was the best thing that ever happened to me.
George Morgan's blighty wound was an honourable one, honourably obtained. There were less noble circumstances in which to earn that longed-for home. Private Jack Sweeney, 1st Battalion Lincolnshire Regiment, wrote in a letter home in January 1917, "My captain has had to go into hospital. He was playing football and broke his knee. He thinks he's very lucky. So do we, as it's a sure blighty one. No such luck for me."
There were no absolutes in this matter. In a marginal case, a ticket to blighty might depend entirely on the whim of some doctor at the base. Indeed, there were doctors with a tendency to think of every soldier on sick parade who was not totally incapacitated as a malingerer from whom the only relevant treatment was another dose of life in the trenches. Lance Sergeant Elmer Cotton met such a doctor at a divisional base camp. He used to line the men up and go along the line, asking each one,
"Well, what's the matter with you, my man?"
Bad teeth, sir.
"Well, I don't want you to eat the Germans."
Consumption, sir.
"Go and spit at them."
Short-sighted, sir.
"How far can you see?"
About 30 yards, sir.
"Well, the trench is only 15 yards apart in some places. Up you go and best of luck."
shot in the legs, sir.
"Up you go and shoot the man who shot you."
Bad eyes, sir.
"Just the man we need for listening posts."
The result of this particular doctor's methods was that one man with a varicose vein and another with the trigger finger shot off were returned to the firing line.
Sometimes troops got leave. One of the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders wrote home,
Dear Jeannie, I'm expecting leave soon. Take a good look at the floor. You'll see nothing but the ceiling when I get home.
Second Lieutenant Kenneth McCardle, the brave young officer par excellence of the 17th Manchester, was just 26 when he spent what was to be his last leave in Blighty. Back with his battalion on the Somme, only a few weeks before his death, he wrote in his diary,
To thoroughly enjoy leave, one should be engaged, or married, very newly married, or have, well, a friend with a delicate but over-loving love of sensation. Failing this, one has a rebelliousness. Places one always loved seem intolerably dull. People one have found thrilling now fill one with dissatisfaction. Busy days have fallen flat. The ordinary dinner at the Carlton, box at the Gaiety, supper at Ciro's, the programme is dull and tiresome. It's hard indeed to keep up the illusion of enjoyment. One says, well, good night, see you tomorrow, with a dreary feeling of stalemate and a sense of acting indifferently done. One enters the lift at one's hotel in a villainously bad humour.
There are only 9 days of leave after 100 of work. 100 of discomfort and hard work, plain necessary work, stupid necessary work. 100 days and nights of uneventful dullness and of wearying strain. 100 days and nights of keeping cheerful, of pretending you don't mind dirt and discomfort, and are quite used to being killed. And then 9 days and nights of leave. Surely they should be more than a holiday full of comfort and pleasure. One needs days of lazy dulness and luxurious spending. Eyes sleepy from adoring someone, a low laugh, inexplicable sunlight in her hair. Someone with soft clothes, leading up to nights of madness, nights drunk with loveliness and love.
But I was taken for tea to clean trenches at Murraycourt, and it is a very wet night, and the roads are very muddy. And first I must have my dinner on the door covered with newspaper and laid from a windowsill to a packing case, and sit on the carpenter's bench, it was such a stroke of luck to find, and which made the officer's mess so perfectly top-hole. Cheero, it's a jolly old walk. Those 7 days passed quicker than any I've known. Oh, those goodbyes, and that bone-in-the-throat feeling.
A soldier given leave would cross the channel, get the train to London, then go straight home from the station and arrive at his front door in full kit. His boots and uniform still covered in Flanders mud.
Then once again the soldier was on the boat bound for France, but going back from leave was worlds away from going to France for the first time. I remember, on the afterdeck of the boat, the troops returning off leave. They were mostly very quiet and deep in thought. And on the foredeck, men of a new draft going over for the first time were singing all the latest songs and laughing and joking. They didn't know what they were in for.
They were summoned from the hillside, they were calling from the glen, and the country found them ready at the stirring call for men. Let no tears add to their hardship as the soldiers pass along, and although your heart is breaking, make it sing this cheery song. Keep the hope fires burning while your hearts are yearning. Though your lads are far away, they dream of home. There's a silver lining through the dark clouds shining. Turn the dark clouds inside out till the boys come home. Turn the dark clouds inside out till the boys come home.
And Vera Britain was coming home. The boat was a leave boat, mostly officers and nurses, but some Tommies. Another boat, crammed with Tommies, followed in our wake. Were escorted by 6 destroyers. Met another transport going towards Boulogne. Men all waved to us and cheered. Crossing very good, sea smooth. It seemed a very little way after many hours on the sea. It seemed very strange to be at Victoria again. Same old crowd round barriers, same old tea rooms, same old everything. One began to believe one hadn't really been away.
It was 1918. The war was drawing to a close, but as the good news spread, bad news came from home. Corporal Flowers, Army Service Corps.
When we heard the armistice was signed, we thought we'd have a bit of fun. There was a lot of small dump ammunition and veery lights, so we set them alight, firing shots into them. And then, of course, you only wanted one to go up, and all went. We had a real Guy Fawkes. The officers never interfered, but a bit later, we was all talking together, having a bit of sport, because all work had finished, and this officer came across to me.
Flowers, I want to work with you.
I thought it was about the stuff we'd blown up.
Come across to my office.
He linked me. And that struck such a note in my head, because I was only a corporal, and there was this officer linking me with his arm. We got to the door of the office.
Have you had from your wife of late?
Yes, I had one yesterday, on the 10th. Now, my wife works in munitions, and in this letter, she told me she was taking time off to go and nurse some mother who was bad with influenza.
Did she say anything about feeling poorly?
No, that influenza was raging, and it dawned on me immediately what he was going to say. I said, don't go and tell me what I'm thinking.
I'm afraid I am. I've got a telegram here. She passed away.
I just swooned into his arms. He sat me in a chair in his office. He made me take a drink of whiskey.
Now, I'm going to leave you here on your own for a while, and I'm going off to get your leave through.
I couldn't even thank him, because I was just out. I thought, what a day it was for this to happen. Now that we can be sure we're going to get home, because there hadn't been a day in the last 4 years when we dared say that. And now it looked as if we were all going safe and see our homes again. Now this has come. I was on the boat the next day. And of course, the leave boat. With the war being over, it was all jollificated. All the lads excited. But I ran into one chap leaning over the rail. I thought he was sick at first, and then I saw he was weeping. Put my hand on his shoulder and said, "What's the matter, chum?" And he pulled a telegram out of his pocket and showed me. Same thing. So I pulled mine out and says, "There's a pair of us." We stuck together, not knowing where to go, what corner to get into, get out of it all. Broken down. I've had some journeys in my life, but I never had one like that one. To think I'd gone 4 years without a scratch, except a bit of gas, and got to the end of the war, and then to lose her. It took me a day to get down to Balham, another day to get across to London, and a day to make my way up home. And by the time I got home, she'd been buried 3 days. When this rotten war is over, no more soldiering for me. When I get my civic clothes on, oh how happy I shall be. No more church parades on Sunday. No more putting in for leave. I shall kiss the sergeant major. Oh, I'll miss him, how he'll grieve.
Many a time I were in trenches and it were a bit quiet. I used to daydream about what it'd be like when it were all over and we went home. I could see all battalion getting up train at station and marching up Bolton Street, wearing his medals and old lasses cheering us and band playing and mayor coming out to welcome us back. But when I did get back, it were night, on the last train from Bradford. And I were only one who got off at station. And as I walked to Bolton Street, it were that quiet, just sounding my boots on pavement. I was forced to smile to myself, remembering how I used to dream about what it'd be like. The only person I saw were a bobby as I passed town hall, and he said,
"Good night, lad."
And I always remember hearing town hall clock striking 12. And I walked up lane, and there were no band playing, but I didn't mind, because I were home again.
And when they ask us
We spent our pay in some cafe and fought wild women night and day. Brothers of Cushion's charm we ever had, and when they ask us, and they're certainly going to ask us, the reason why we didn't win the crowd again, oh, we'll never tell them, no, we'll never tell them. There was a front, but damned if we knew where.
The First World War ended at 11 a.m. on the 11th of November, 1918.
We've watched you play cricket and every sort of game. At football, golf and polo, you men have made your name. But now your country needs you to play your part in war. And no matter what befalls you, we shall love you all the more. So come and join the forces as your fathers did before. No, we don't want to lose you, but we think you want to go. For your king and your country both need you so. We shall want you and miss you, but with all our might and main, we shall cheer you, thank you, kiss you when you come back again. We don't